Hi everyone, we'll just wait a couple moments to start just so everyone can join us. Maybe start at 7:02. Hi Natalie, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Gonna wait a couple minutes just for allowing people to make their way over. I'm great. Thanks for asking. I've never done a one-way video camera. It's very strange. All right, well, we can get started now. So just to introduce myself, my name's Lindsay. I'm a first-year medical student at the University of Ottawa, and I'm from Belleville, Ontario. And today we're talking about infectious disease and disease prevention, and just ways that you can prevent disease for yourself. It's often talked about for us at medical school in the capacity of the hospital, but it's also important just as a citizen and someone of the community to try to avoid infectious disease. And I thought that it would be interesting to just start off with some ways that the audience knows to avoid infectious disease because it's now, I think, more than ever, really a prevalent topic, and people know more about it than they did 5 years ago. So I was curious to see if there's any ways that you practice now to avoid infection. Hand washing, yeah, that's probably the biggest one, really important. And especially now, um, there's hand sanitizer everywhere you go, so it's definitely important, and it's good that you're now able to do that whenever you go somewhere. So that's a big one. Are there any other ones that people can think of? Yeah, Ellen, if you stay home when you're sick, another great one, and I think something that is again becoming more prevalent, coughing into your elbow. Thanks, Nikki. Yeah, all really good ways of preventing infection that everyone already knows about. But I'll just be reiterating some of those and mentioning a few others that you can do over the next half hour. So first, I just wanted to talk a bit about what infectious disease is and how you can get it and how you can prevent it. So infectious diseases are just diseases that you can catch, and there are many different diseases, and you can get them from many different places. For example, you can get them from other people. We think of, for example, measles. You can get them from insects, such as mosquitoes, or animals like horses or cattle. And you can also get them from the environment, so contaminated water or waste is a common vehicle of transmission. And there are a variety of symptoms that you can present with when you get an infectious disease. For example, you could get fever or chills are common symptoms, as well as a loss of appetite, fatigue, just aches and pains, some diarrhea or other bowel problems, as well as difficulty breathing. But as you might guess from those symptoms, they're not really specific. Fever is pretty infectious, but it doesn't really tell you what bug it is or how you got it. So there's definitely a lot of other things that have to happen to really narrow down what the issue is when you get these symptoms. So then I just wanted to talk about who is at risk. But before we do that, I'll just pause to see if there's any questions about the symptoms or where you get it. All right, looks like we're all good. So, who is at risk? Babies, children, and elderly at risk. So, really, each span, each sort of extreme of the spectrum of age. Also, people who are already sick, their immune systems are going to be a bit busy to be dealing with yet another thing. So, that puts you at increased risk of infection. There's also pre-existing conditions that, again, really you can just think of it as your immune system being busy, as well as weak immune systems, which can happen, for example, if you're on immune suppressant drugs, which some people are depending on conditions that they have. Also, just if you're not eating a healthy diet, that can increase your risk. If you have poor personal hygiene or living conditions, so for example, it was mentioned hand washing. If that's not something that you do often or something like that, then that also puts you at increased risk. And again, living conditions, and that's a bit hard because oftentimes we don't have control over that. So a lot of these things are not modifiable, which definitely makes it challenging when we're thinking about trying to reduce our risk. So it might be easier to eat a healthy diet, but harder to move or not be a child or not be old. So just important to think of it in terms of things that you can change and things that are just more to be aware of. And there's also an increased risk if you're tired or stressed. And again, the big one is not washing your hands often. So that's an easy modifiable one. Just a comment here. I'm guessing if you smoke, that could also put you at risk. Yeah, I believe it would. I don't know for sure about that, but I always just think that smoking usually puts you at risk of almost anything. So I would assume, and that would be some sort of, oftentimes smoking leads to pre-existing conditions. We're currently learning about, COPD is a major one, so that maybe comorbid condition could increase your risk as well. And so then we're just going to discuss a little bit more about how diseases are transmitted. Touched a little bit on it, but just to go a bit more in depth. Any questions before we move on, though? Looks like we're good. So first we'll just mention there's contact transmission, which is I think the way that most people think of transmitting disease. So that's just when you have direct contact with infectious blood or body substance, So this could be direct contact where blood or something like that comes in contact with from an animal, it comes in contact with a person so that it's able to get into their body. So it's just like, for example, blood from someone else, then getting into your system. It would be considered a direct contact. And that can happen, for example, with diseases passed from mother to fetus, as well as with needles or with the exchange of saliva. So those are just common ways of direct contact transmission. There's also if you get infected blood from an animal that in turn enters the person's system. So that can happen, I mentioned mosquitoes, as well as bats and things like that. And there's also indirect contact. So that would be when an infected host passes something to another person, which then goes on an inanimate object. So for example, if a host puts the infection on, for example, a keyboard or another surface, and then you touch that and then you get infected. So that would be indirect contact. There's also droplet and airborne transmission, which are pretty similar, but droplet transmission is when the infectious agent is in a large droplet, whereas airborne, it's actually smaller and it's like aerosol, so it's in the air and it's inhaled. So we can think of these as large particles that then can carry viruses and go through the air and then can deposit onto your skin or get into your body. And that can be something like influenza or mumps. And there's also smaller particles which are airborne, which you can inhale or they can be deposited in your body. And the classic one that people think of as an airborne disease is tuberculosis. And finally, we have foodborne transmission, so that's just contaminated food, waterborne, contaminated water, as well as vector-borne, so carried by a vector, meaning, for example, a mosquito. So lots of different routes of transmission that we have to be aware of. Any questions about any of that? All right. So now we'll discuss a bit about controlling infectious disease and how not to get it. So that's sort of the important part of the talk. And controlling infection is really a multifaceted approach. We talked about hand hygiene, but there's also just you have to consider the bugs that are infecting you. You know, some are going to be resistant and more aggressive, so that's something that you have to consider. Just people's behavior, like hand washing, as well as their knowledge about infectious disease. So this is really helping with that, just being here, as well as the environment. So again, I mentioned your living conditions could impact your risk. So again, that's something that's probably difficult to change, but just something that does allow you to control infectious disease. But the most important ones are things like waste management, cleaning and disinfecting, personal protective equipment or PPE, hand hygiene, and just getting vaccinated and following precautions that are set. And I think now a lot of places that we go do have precautions in place, so it's just important to follow what is being said to you, because most likely they're following guidelines that have been researched and are well thought out. So for your own safety and everyone else's safety, it's just good to follow those precautions when they're there. So I'm going to go over hand washing a bit more in depth because that is really one of the most important measures in preventing transmission of infection. So I just have a little handout from a Canadian organization, the Infection Prevention and Control Canada, and they just go through 11 steps of how to wash your hands with soap and water, which though we all assume we do right, there are always ways that we can improve to prevent infection. So first, you wet your hands with water. I don't have water here, but I'll try to do a little demo. You want to apply enough soap to cover the entire surface of your hands, and then you're wanting to rub the soap between your two palms. And then you're wanting to wash the back of your hand with the palm of your other hand. So just going like this and making sure you're getting the backs of your hands as well, in addition to the palms. And then you also want to get your wrists. And if you're wearing a watch, then maybe trying to get under it or even taking it off just to make sure that you're getting at your wrists. And then you're also going to wash the space between your fingers, making sure that that's good, as well as your thumbs, cleaning your thumbs well. and then your fingertips. So if you have soap on your palm, just cleaning your fingertips with that. And then rinsing all the soap out from your hands and drying off your hands with a towel, and then disposing the towel in the bin. And they also talk about, if you have a towel, turning off the faucet with the towel as well. But that's not always available. So that should take about 15 to 30 seconds. So you're, again, just some sort of key highlights is that you're wanting to get your palms, you're wanting to get your wrists in between your fingers, your thumbs, your fingertips, and doing that for just under 30 seconds. So does anyone have any questions about that? All right. So now I just wanted to play a quick game, sort of, about sort of breaches of infection control. Does it matter if you use hot or cold water? I don't know for sure. However, this Infection Prevention and Control Canada guideline does say with warm water. So maybe that would be best, but I'm not 100% sure. Warm water would be more comfortable, but I'm not sure if that's why they specified. But great question. All right, so just going to go through these breaches, and they have to do with your hand hygiene. So I'll just throw a couple pictures up, and then if you can guess whether you think that would be a breach in infection control practice or not, then you can just type it in the chat. All right, so I'll start with this one, which is very pretty, but I don't know if people can see that. Yeah, there you go. So do you think that that would be an issue in terms of infection control or no? So it's just like acrylic nails. Any guesses? No worries if not. So acrylic nails and fake nails do harbor more microorganisms. Yeah, so bacteria can get under the long nails. So they do harbor more microorganisms and are also harder to clean than just natural nails. And they're also just linked to poor hand hygiene practices. So you just might not be washing your hands as well with those nails. Though I do have to say it's probably not a significant increase in your risk, but maybe just something to be aware of, and just making sure that if we're wearing fake nails that we're still, or just have long nails, we are still washing our hands well. All right, so good job, everyone. Now I'll show a new photo, and I'll do this one. I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully just some nice fresh nail polish. Looks great, nice color. So does anyone think that just fresh nail polish would be a breach? This one is a bit tricky, I will admit, but freshly applied nail polish does not really increase the number of bacteria around the nails. However, if you have chipped nail polish or just old nail polish, then that may harbor some more organisms that were not removed. So freshly painted nails are good. Again, not a significant increased risk, but maybe just something to be aware of. And we'll do one more for fun. So how about this one? So this one, oh, don't know if you can see that super well, but just a nice big ring. Do people think that would be a breach or good hand hygiene? So again, similar to the rest, jewelry that is hard to clean, which I would say that one might be, it was pretty big, that can hide some bacteria and viruses from your hand washing. So it does potentially increase your risk of infection, but again, not significantly. Yeah, but that one was quite a large ring, so you're definitely going to want to make sure that you're washing underneath. But those are more just for fun. They wouldn't contribute like a huge risk, but just something interesting to be aware of. All right, does anyone have any questions about that? All right, so now just to summarize, so just some key responsibilities that we have are to know our immunization status and making sure that we are getting immunized to reduce the spread of infection, getting boosters when need be, and things like that, and just knowing this information and having it handy. Just a comment here. Touching your face too much can lead to infection, definitely, just because that could pass some organisms into your body. So another easy way of preventing infection, and something that I'm not very good at not touching my face, but I think with wearing a mask definitely prevents you from touching your face, so it's sort of a handy byproduct, though that may not be its first intention. I think it does help with that as well. But yeah, definitely an important one, just to avoid touching your face, particularly when you're out in the community and have been touching things without washing your hands afterwards. It's a great point. And tough one to do for sure. Yeah, I'm super bad at that, and I think I've gotten better in the past couple years, but it is hard. And Ellen mentioned this earlier, but another way of reducing infection is just to stay home when we're unwell. I feel like sometimes society doesn't make us want to do this, or it's sort of like been, I don't know, looked down upon, but that's also really important to do for others and for your own health and getting better. It's just always good to stay home and relax when we're not feeling well. And then just to always be modeling appropriate behavior for others, I think is also important and sort of relevant to today. It's just good to encourage the community to always look out for each other. So if you're one person that's doing that, then others may see it and follow. So that's always just a good thing to keep in mind too. And as I mentioned before, there are lots of good precautions in place now, really wherever we go. So just following those and going by what the guidelines say that have been researched and publicized, it's always the best bet because those are, backed by science and studies. So if there are precautions in place, please follow those. And then Nikki mentioned good cough and sneezing etiquette is also great and goes a long way. Though we may not think of that because that's something we've been taught since we were very young, but that's another just really basic way of reducing the spread of infection. And then we mentioned good hand washing practice, which is one of the best ways, as well as not touching your face. So those sort of go hand in hand. Pun not intended. And then we also just have good hygiene practices in general. So just making sure that we're showering and keeping clean is always a great way to prevent infection. And that's all I have today. If anybody has any questions about that, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Though I will admit I'm not an infectious disease specialist, but I feel like we've all learned a lot in the past couple of years as well about infectious disease. If there aren't any questions, then I hope everyone has a great evening. No worries, my absolute pleasure. All right, have a good night, everyone. Bye.